This is an artificially aware original production.
Artificially aware, so we're sorry, Orderback 201
Imagine this. You're strolling through a dimly lit aisle of a secondhand bookstore, the kind of place where the air is thick with the scent of worn-out pages and memories. That's where I found it, a battered copy of Your Erroneous Zones by Wayne Dyer, tucked between thick manuals on philosophy and self-help. At first, the title made me pause. Erroneous Zones. It sounded like an uncharted map of the mind's darker alleys, areas we'd rather not acknowledge. But then there was something liberating in that word erroneous, flawed, mistaken. It hinted that maybe, just maybe, we're all carrying around a load of self-imposed nonsense that's holding us back. So I dove in, and let me tell you, what I found wasn't just a book. It was more like a manifesto against the mental traps we willingly walk into every single day. This isn't some airy-fairy feel-good guide. No, Dyer's giving us the verbal equivalent of a sledgehammer, daring us to shatter the myths we hold about happiness, self-worth, and even the very meaning of our past. This is the roadmap to taking back control of your own mind, and once you see the possibility, there's no going back. Right off the bat, Dyer makes a bold claim. Happiness isn't some mysterious force that's up to the universe to grant or deny. No, happiness is the direct outcome of how you choose to perceive your problems. Yes, you heard me. It's not the problems themselves that put you in a bad place. It's your own mental choreography around them. Society has you convinced that emotions are like thunderstorms, impossible to control. You're just supposed to sit and wait it out, right? Wrong. Dyer argues that emotions are as controllable as a thermostat, that you can dial your feelings up or down depending on how you see the challenge in front of you. Think of it like this. When you feel lousy about something, that's not fate slapping you in the face. It's your mind's reaction to your beliefs about what's supposed to be happening. It's cultural conditioning, the kind that seeps in through song lyrics, sappy movies, even well-meaning friends telling you to follow your heart as if you're powerless over it. Dyer suggests that you question every unhappy thought the way a detective questions a suspect. Why are you feeling miserable? Is it really the situation, or could it be the way you're choosing to interpret it? He doesn't pretend this is easy work. Retraining your mind is like a mental workout, but every time you push through and choose a new thought, you're closer to taking charge of your happiness. And then there's self-love. Now I know what you're thinking. Self-love? Isn't that just code for being a self-centered jerk? Not according to Dyer. He dives into the difference between self-love and narcissism, and it's a game changer. Here's the kicker. Most people, even the so-called confident ones, don't really like themselves. They deflect compliments, brush off praise, or credit their successes to dumb luck. Sound familiar? That's low self-esteem, and Dyer's ready to tell you it's ruining your life. Society conditions you from birth to think it's noble to put yourself down, to apologize for your strengths, to make yourself smaller. But here's the real twist. All that self-denial chips away at your ability to believe in yourself, to trust yourself. Self-love isn't about vanity. It's about saying, yes, I'm worthy, and actually believing it. And here's the practical takeaway. The next time someone compliments you, don't deflect. Take it in. Let it hit you. The moment you start valuing yourself, you stop seeking approval from everyone else. Dyer argues that your self-image sets the stage for every choice you make. So unless you tackle the issue of self-esteem head-on, you're stuck. Dyer's next move is almost poetic. He asks us to picture ourselves as elephants. Not just any elephants, but ones shackled by old chains. The tragic irony? These elephants are free to move, but they don't know it because they're so used to being tied down that they've stopped trying. We humans are much the same. We let our pasts define us, as if every mistake, every heartbreak, every failure is a weight we'll drag forever. Think of the adjectives you use to describe yourself. I'm shy, I'm not creative, I'm bad with money. Those aren't truths, they're relics of your past. Dyer calls this the ghosting effect, living today as a phantom of yesterday's choices. His solution? Reframe those labels. Instead of I am, try saying I used to be, and watch what happens. You start to feel like a work in progress, instead of a prisoner of past narratives. Imagine the freedom in that. You're rewriting your own story, dropping old baggage. There's an unexpected lightness in it, like an elephant realizing the chain is gone, ready to step forward into new possibilities. And then there's the question of guilt and worry. Two heavyweights we tend to carry as if they're badges of honor. I'm worried about my future. That means I'm responsible. Or I feel guilty about my past mistakes, so I must be a good person. But Dyer calls these emotions what they are, mental deadweight. Worry doesn't actually prepare you for the future. It traps you in an endless loop of what-ifs. Guilt? It's not a path to redemption. It's just a chain tying you to a past you can't change. You might think that worrying makes you conscientious, or that guilt is some kind of penance, but Dyer says these emotions just keep you from acting in the present. Every time you catch yourself worrying or feeling guilty, he suggests asking a question: is this going to change anything? The answer is almost always no. So why do it? There's power in letting go of worry and guilt, in trusting that you're allowed to mess up and move on. That's where freedom begins, not in some perfect guilt-free life, but in the choice to drop the mental weights we've trained ourselves to carry. Wayne Dyer has this way of hitting you where it hurts, especially when he talks about flexibility, or rather the lack of it. Dyer wants us to understand that life isn't a script, despite how much we act like it is. We follow routines and make decisions that keep us snug in the familiar, but that same familiarity can turn into a cage. Rigidity, he says, is the enemy of growth. Think about your daily life. The same coffee order, the same type of TV shows, the same responses to conflict. Every time we repeat a pattern, we're reinforcing a personal prison cell, brick by brick. Dyer's advice here is radical yet simple. Embrace spontaneity. Seek out experiences that break the mold, even if they seem trivial or bizarre. Try a new food, talk to a stranger, or take a different route to work. This isn't about grand gestures. It's about choosing freshness over familiarity to wake yourself up from the autopilot of predictability. Rigidity, he says, isn't just a comfort zone. It's the quickest way to dull yourself into a state of living death. Being flexible doesn't mean you have to uproot your life. It means being willing to surprise yourself. And isn't that the essence of being alive? One of the toughest pills Dyer makes us swallow is the idea of letting go of the need for payback, especially when people treat us unfairly. Human instincts run deep. We're wired for eye for an eye justice. If someone stabs you in the back, there's an almost primal urge to balance the scales. But Dyer warns that this urge is a trap, one that locks us into a cycle of bitterness and limitation. He doesn't preach forgiveness for the sake of sainthood. He's more practical than that. Vengeance, he says, is a form of mental bondage, anchoring us to a painful experience and chaining us to the very people we'd rather forget. Imagine lugging around every slight, every insult like a backpack filled with stones. It's exhausting, pointless, and the person who hurts you probably doesn't care one way or the other. When you repay cruelty with cruelty, you're not fighting for justice, you're putting yourself in a mental prison. Dyer's alternative: let it go. Choose not to be shackled by someone else's actions. It's not about surrendering, it's about freedom. The real win isn't in retribution, but in reclaiming your mental space and peace of mind. And here we get to the core of Dyer's philosophy, the concept of erroneous zones, those twisted, self-imposed mind traps that most of us don't even realize we're carrying. These zones are the beliefs, habits, and narratives that shape our actions and reactions, quietly guiding us down paths we'd never choose if we were fully awake to them. Imagine a mental hall of mirrors, each one reflecting a distorted version of yourself, images you've collected over years, from family, culture, media, even your own past failures. These zones are the culprits behind self-sabotage, those moments when you act in a way that goes against your own best interests. Dyer identifies these mental traps and challenges us to dismantle them, one by one, like a mechanic taking apart a broken engine. But it's no easy task. These erroneous zones are deeply ingrained, often intertwined with our sense of identity. It's like peeling away layers of your own skin to find what's real underneath. Recognizing these zones is uncomfortable because it means questioning beliefs you may have held sacred, dismantling defenses you thought were strengths. But Dyer insists it's worth it, because once you're free of these self-imposed limitations, you're no longer reacting to life, you're creating it. Dyer's stance on emotions is a revolutionary one. He argues that emotions are choices, not involuntary reactions. Now, this might go against everything you've been taught. You've probably heard that emotions are like the weather, random, uncontrollable. I can't help it, that's just how I feel. But Dyer calls this nonsense. He says that with awareness and effort, you can choose how you respond to any situation. This isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending to be happy. It's about realizing that every feeling is the result of thoughts, and thoughts can be changed. Imagine the power in that. Instead of being a puppet to your emotions, you become the puppet master, directing them to serve you rather than sabotage you. It's not easy, though. It's like trying to rewire your brain, a daily exercise in mental discipline. But once you accept that you're responsible for how you feel, there's no one else to blame, no circumstance to curse. And that's the real shift Dyer wants from us, not just to understand this concept intellectually, but to live it day by day, emotion by emotion. To Dyer, the art of living in the present is the ultimate form of freedom. We spend so much of our lives either replaying the past or worrying about the future that we forget the only real moment we have is right now. The past, it's a story, a series of mental snapshots that no longer exist. The future, a mental projection of what might be, filled with worries and what ifs. The present is where life happens, but most of us treat it like an inconvenient pit stop on the way to something better. Dyer sees this mindset as a tragedy, a colossal waste of human potential. Living in the present doesn't mean ignoring responsibilities or neglecting to plan. It means embracing what's right in front of you, without letting the weight of past failures or future fears color your experience. Dyer suggests that mindfulness, bringing your full awareness to the current moment, is like hitting a reset button on all the mental noise that drags you down. Imagine the peace of mind that comes with living fully in the now, untouched by yesterday's regrets or tomorrow's anxieties. It's not about doing nothing, it's about doing everything with full presence, making every moment count, because in the end, the present is all we ever truly have. One of Dyer's most refreshing insights comes from his relentless attack on our craving for approval. Society tells us from the cradle that self-worth is something to be earned through others' validation, whether it's from parents, teachers, colleagues, or even strangers. But Dyer argues that this need for external validation is the quickest route to losing yourself. If your value depends on someone else's approval, you're constantly at the mercy of forces outside your control. It's like handing your life's steering wheel to anyone willing to take it, while you sit in the back, hoping they steer you somewhere good. Dyer's approach is radical. Seek validation only from within. Cultivate a sense of self that doesn't flinch when others criticize, doesn't swell when others praise. Internal validation, he says, is the bedrock of true freedom. Imagine the power in that, no longer bending, twisting, or shrinking to fit someone else's mold. When you stop seeking approval, you're free to be authentic. You're free to live your truth, even if it isn't always applauded. Dyer wants us to ask ourselves, whose life are we living? And if the answer isn't ours, he dares us to reclaim it. And that brings us to Dyer's method for dismantling those mind traps, those erroneous zones, with one key weapon: questioning beliefs. Every limiting belief you hold, he says, is just a thought you failed to challenge. And those unchecked beliefs act like invisible walls, limiting how far you can go, what you think you can achieve, and even who you think you are. Dyer's technique is deceptively simple. When you catch yourself thinking something self-defeating or critical, question it as you would a liar. Say you believe, "I'm not good at public speaking." Don't take it at face value. Dig in. Why do I believe that? Who told me that? Has it ever actually been true? It's a mental interrogation that can feel awkward or tedious, but it's the only way to free yourself from the prison of unexamined beliefs. Dyer's philosophy here is that every limiting thought can be unlearned, replaced by a new belief that supports rather than stifles you. Through this questioning process, you begin to see that most limitations are illusions, upheld by nothing but your willingness to believe them. And once you start tearing down those walls, you find a whole world of possibility waiting on the other side. Now, Dyer doesn't shy away from difficult truths, and here's a big one. Justice, as you imagine it, isn't real. Life doesn't follow a script of fair play, and if you're expecting cosmic justice, you're in for a rude awakening. Dyer's not saying there's no point in standing up for what's right, but he's pushing back against the illusion that life should ever be fair. The belief in universal fairness is a mental trap, leading to bitterness, resentment, and frustration. Think about it. How much energy do you spend stewing over situations that shouldn't have happened to you? Dyer argues that life doesn't owe you anything, and understanding that truth frees you from endless disappointment. This isn't about passivity or cynicism, it's about facing reality head on. When you accept that life includes both beauty and cruelty, justice and injustice, you stop being at war with reality. And that acceptance doesn't make you weak, it makes you resilient. Instead of wasting energy on the injustice, you can focus on what you can control. It's not about abandoning ideals, it's about grounding them in reality, so you can move forward with clarity rather than constantly looking over your shoulder wondering why life didn't play fair. In Dyer's world, change isn't a flash of inspiration, it's a slow, steady climb. He understands that shifting your beliefs, emotions, and habits is like building a muscle. It's slow, sometimes painful work. He warns us to go into this process with low expectations. Think of it like getting in shape. You wouldn't expect six-pack abs after a week at the gym, and the same logic applies to transforming your mind. Dyer's message here is blunt but honest. Lasting change happens through persistence, not perfection. Small steps are the foundation of big transformations. Celebrate each minor victory, even if it feels insignificant. Over time, those small shifts create a ripple effect, transforming how you think, feel, and live. This isn't about arriving at some final destination of perfection. It's about continuously evolving, choosing day by day to break free from the old mental traps that hold you back. Dyer encourages us to approach personal growth with humility, patience, and a touch of humor. It's a journey, not a finish line, and every step you take toward a freer, more authentic self is a step worth taking. Wayne Dyer's Your Erroneous Zones is, in the end, a practical manifesto for mental freedom. This book isn't a lecture on positivity or a pep talk for the downhearted. It's a blueprint for dismantling the erroneous zones in your mind that keep you from living fully and freely. Every chapter is a confrontation, a challenge to the false beliefs and mental habits that run your life without your consent. Dyer is relentless in his insistence that you and only you are responsible for your happiness, your worth, and your choices. He's not here to tell you to dream big or manifest greatness. He's here to ask, are you willing to take control? This isn't about perfection or living up to anyone's standards, but your own. It's about waking up from the autopilot of conditioned thinking, about seeing life through clear eyes, free from guilt, fear, or the need for validation. Dyer's words are a call to action, an invitation to live a life that's not defined by limits, but by choice. So if you're ready, crack open your own mind, question everything, and decide for yourself what kind of life you want to live. Thanks for tuning in. If this sparked something in you, hit that like button, drop a comment, and let's keep this conversation going.